As their name suggests, pound cakes can be kind of heavy. And so I'm gonna show you a recipe for one of my favorite pound cakes that's a little on the lighter side. It's still sweet, it's crumbly, but it's rich with the flavors of toasted pistachios and kind of lightened by the brightness of some lemon zest and some almond extract. I promise you, if you make it, you'll make it again. The first thing we need to do is work with our pistachios. So this is 1.5 cups of whole raw pistachios that I've already toasted in the oven for 6 minutes at 350 degrees. But now I'm gonna put it in my food processor and process it until it's a really fine meal. Since you toast the pistachios, if you process it for too long, it'll kind of become gummy and oily. That's not what you want. So you just wanna process it until it resembles kind of like a cornmeal or a thickened flour. Now I'm going to take my pistachio meal and just put it in a bowl. So the first thing we're gonna add is 1 full cup of granulated sugar. And then we're gonna add 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. And I'm just gonna whisk this together to combine it. Okay, here I also have the zest of 1 lemon. You'll notice that the recipe calls for the zest of 2 lemons, and that's because we're gonna put the other lemon zest on top of the glaze once the cake has cooled and has been coated in a really simple, delicious powdered sugar milk glaze. Okay, so I'm adding lemon zest to the dry ingredients, and again, just whisking to combine. And you can already see that the color is gonna turn a palish yellow-green from the pistachios. And you can also get a hint that this cake is gonna be really crumbly from the chunks of pistachio nut meats that are still incorporated into the batter, but not fully dissolved or broken down into a fine flour. Okay, and now to our dry ingredients, we're just gonna add the wet. It's a really simple 1 bowl wonder. I've got 1 stick of butter here that I've melted. That's gonna lend moisture to the bread. It's also gonna obviously lend richness and a slight buttery taste, which is really nice with the toasted pistachios. 2 whole eggs. 1 cup of sour cream, also going to lend tenderness and a slight tang that reacts really nicely in the batter. And then our last ingredients. Here I have mixed together 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract and 1/2 teaspoon of almond extract. I found that this combination does wonders to highlight the toasted nuttiness of the pistachio by providing kind of a bright floral and sweet flavor just to complement it. Okay, and just whisk this all together until it's incorporated. You don't want to overmix, but you're probably fine. So just mix the liquid ingredients together. And then once the batter starts to thicken up a little bit, I honestly prefer to mix it with a spatula because I think it's a little bit easier. By using ground pistachios, it's kind of like using a nut flour in this recipe, except you're just making it at home really quickly. And so you're cutting back on some of the flour that you're using, the all-purpose flour that you're using, and instead you're replacing it with something that's naturally really rich and oily. And so all of that translates to make a really luscious pound cake. Okay, my batter has come together. It's lumpy, it's gonna be lumpy, that's good. And now I'm just gonna prepare my pan. So I have a standard size loaf pan right here. I've already coated the inside with some vegetable oil. And rather than using parchment paper, what I'm going to use is 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar. And so I'm gonna pour it in my pan, and I'm just gonna turn my pan to coat it in the sugar. What this does is it caramelizes on the outside of the pound cake, creating a nice, sweet, slightly crisp exterior to an otherwise really velvety pound cake. Okay, so my sugar is coating the inside of my pan, and I'm just gonna transfer the batter right in here. My oven is preheated to 350 degrees, and my pound cake is gonna bake for just 55 to 60 minutes until a toothpick inserted into the center comes out clean. All right, I'm gonna level off the pound cake, get it nice and even in the pan. All right, it's time to throw it in the oven. My cake has been out of the oven for about an hour, but it's still a little bit warm to the touch. So while it's finishing cooling, I'm gonna go ahead and make the glaze. This is a really simple powdered sugar glaze that's just comprised of 2 cups of powdered sugar, some milk, and some vanilla. The recipe calls for 2 cups of powdered sugar to 2.5 tablespoons of milk and 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. However, If you find that it's a little too runny, add a little more powdered sugar. If you find it's a little too thick, add just a few more drops of milk. The idea is just to reach the right consistency to where it's really easy and pourable and it drips down the side of the cake, but still coats the cake pretty evenly. Okay, so I'm gonna take my milk and just pour it right into my powdered sugar, as well as my vanilla. And I'm gonna stir. You want a glaze that's pretty spreadable and kind of thick. And for me, this is just the right amount of liquid to powdered sugar. All right, my cake has cooled completely in the loaf pan, and so we're ready to take it out. I just run a knife around the edges, and I'm gonna put it on this cutting board. And I'll be the first to admit that the surface of this cake is not pretty on its own. It just looks kind of brown and craggy. I promise the inside is way more beautiful. And the good news is we're covering the surface in a beautiful glaze. So don't worry about it. All right, out comes the cake. All right, and I have my glaze prepared right here. It's thick and spreadable, and it will slightly drip over the edges, as you'll see in just a moment. I also have 3 tablespoons of raw pistachios that I have not toasted. If you toast the pistachios, they take on a brown color, and I found that the bright green of raw pistachios is really beautiful against the white of the glaze. So I've just chopped these 3 tablespoons of pistachios, and I'm gonna sprinkle it over top. And then I have my microplane here and my lemon here to zest this last lemon over top of the glaze as well. As you can see, I've already cut into the cake, and you can see that the inside is this pale yellow and green color, which is really lovely, but you'll also notice that it's kind of peppered with these specks of pistachio, which add incredible texture as you're eating the pound cake. And you'll also notice that the glaze around the side of the cake has dripped down just a little bit. Not a ton, like all the way to the bottom, but just enough to kind of make it eye-catching and a little dramatic. And you'll notice that the bright green of the pistachio and the subtle yellow of the lemon zest add a beautiful contrast to the white glaze. And they're stuck to it, so you don't have to worry about it falling everywhere. It never ceases to amaze me how far lemon zest can go. It's such a small addition to the top of the glaze, but it brightens everything up so that the toasted, nutty richness of the pistachios and kind of the subtle floral sweetness of the almond and the vanilla, they all kind of harmonize in this pound cake that in a way that your regular old pound cake just can't. And you know what? If you're feeling adventurous and you're kind of tired of making just a plain sour cream pound cake, give this one a shot. I promise the changes in texture and flavor will make it really exciting. And I stand by my statement earlier that this is one of the baked goods that I want to keep on my counter all the time because it's easy to eat, it's not too sweet, and it's kind of a combination of all the flavors I love. So give this recipe a shot. And if you've enjoyed what you've seen today, subscribe to the Southern Living YouTube channel where you're sure to find other videos that you're bound to enjoy. Thanks so much. Bye.